Nothing happens in Valleygate. Theodora Bridgebrook was on hour 8 of her third day of travel through the mountains of the corridors when she passed the billboard that read, "Welcome to Valleygate." The 3 previous days had been filled with fast food, frantic searches for inns along the rural mountain roads, and every emotion the human body can manage: joy, fear, anger, sorrow, confusion, regret, guilt. The gang's all here, Theodora thought to herself. Her passengers included a duffel bag full of hastily packed clothes, a backpack which held her slate computer and 2 or 3 tampons, a letter from the University of Silverdawn at Dawnburg congratulating her on her acceptance to the College of Medicine, and a little black felt box that she threw in her glove box 3 days ago. All of these things contained within one vehicle made it a getaway car. Thea was running, fleeing deep into the mountains to escape all the good things she had worked so hard for. Ethan, let's just call him her ex-boyfriend for now, had proposed, and Thea had said no. And after 2 hours of arguing in circles about why she was suddenly so hesitant to marry him after they had discussed it not a small number of times, she got in her car and drove back to her apartment. There, waiting for her on the table, was the letter. Thea tore it open and read only the first 7 words. "Theodora, we are pleased to inform you." That was all she needed to stuff it in her back pocket and begin shoving clothes into a bag. And after 2 seconds of asking herself why she was so intent on running away from the good things in her life, she left a note for her roommate, Penny, and drove away from Lettucefield, away from her life, away from everything. The first 5 or 6 hours were easy. Her adrenaline carried her through the night, but as the sun crept over the mountains, she felt exhaustion begin to cloud her mind. She pulled over at an inn very appropriately called the Weary Wanderer and took rest in their cheapest room, which was practically a glorified closet, but offered a soft bed to sleep on. When she awoke, she purchased some food from a fast food restaurant nearby and kept driving. This cycle continued with tiny variations for 2 more days. All the while, she fielded calls and texts from everyone who cared about her. Penny called once. The conversation lasted 3 hours and 28 minutes. Much of it was Thea's attempt to process everything she'd been thinking since Ethan asked her to marry him through manic monologues to which Penny would offer a sentence or 2 as a response. But when Thea had finished, the 2 girls laughed and cried together before Penny finally had to go to work. She offered to take the day off, but Thea wouldn't allow it. But to actually get Penny off the phone, Thea had to promise to give Penny a call and update her as soon as she could. There were 13 calls, 5 voicemails, and 24 texts from Ethan, who had very little to say but many new and creative ways to say it. He said he had visited Penny at work, and that Penny had said she didn't know where Thea was. Thea smiled at this. She knew she had chosen the right person as her best friend. There were 3 calls from Thea's mother, Joanna, of which Thea answered just one. Joanna had heard from Ethan all that had happened, but Thea explained that she just needed some time to gather her thoughts and reflect. This seemed to satisfy Joanna enough to avoid many more probing questions. Finally, there was 1 voicemail from the admissions department at the University of Silverdawn at Dawnburg. They were curious if she had received her acceptance letter. Other than those distractions, the same playlist looped over the speakers in Thea's car. At times, she believed its unending loop kept her going, never making her skip or change a song and giving her enough time to rethink her decisions. No, it simply continued onward, just as Thea did. But when the billboard passed her vision, she knew her quest had come to an end. She followed the roads until she found Honeyglade Street and continued down it a ways before turning into the driveway of a house whose wooden exterior had seen better days, but was altogether exactly as Thea remembered it. This was her grandfather's lakehouse, perched on the edge of Honeyglade Lake in the wilderness of Valleygate. Waiting for her in the driveway was her Uncle Charlie, a muscly, wide-framed 30-something-year-old man who was Thea's mother's younger brother and lived in Valleygate. He bought Thea dinner at a local restaurant, stocked the fridge and cupboards best he could, and made sure the house was all in order. "Your mom called," Uncle Charlie said when Thea asked how he knew she was coming. "Said you were on your way. To what do I owe this visit?" "Nothing in particular," Thea lied. "I just wanted to get some space." "Well, I'm just a phone call away if you need anything. Otherwise, I'll give you all the space you need." The best thing about Uncle Charlie, he doesn't hover. When they had returned from dinner and Uncle Charlie had driven away, Thea entered the home, which creaked with every step she took. The house was old, built by her grandfather years ago and left to his kids. Thea, her parents, and her 4 older brothers would journey to the cabin every summer for a month and enjoy the beauty of Valleygate. But when Thea's father passed and the majority of her brothers had moved out of the house, Joanna stopped traveling quite so much, and visits to the cabin stopped altogether. Uncle Charlie had considered selling a few years back, but couldn't bring himself to do so, and as Thea stepped through the house and felt every seam eke and irk under her foot, she was thankful to Charlie for keeping it in the family. The house itself felt like a member of the family, with all its quirks, both good and bad, and visiting it now brought back memories Thea thought she had forgotten, but the house had not. Like the tire swing that used to hang over the lake from a huge tree branch that came down in a storm, or the jaws of Lottie Farm's honey that would be hand-delivered every day by Lottie herself the day after Thea and her family arrived. The apiary belonged to Lottie's grandmother, who hired Lottie to take honey around the lake. She and Thea were close friends growing up. But for all its age, there was a sense of wonder about the house, a whimsy that settled into the nooks and crannies that gave it more personality than just creaky windows or temperamental air conditioning. No, the house was more than those things. It felt alive at times, like it breathed and that every step taken within its walls was a beat of its oaken heart. Thea felt this as she rediscovered the living room and the kitchen, the basement and the bedrooms. She threw her things down in one of the rooms upstairs. Being the only girl in her family had some perks, and she was the only kid who had gotten a room to herself, and therefore got to dictate how her room was decorated. She had chosen a nautical theme the last time she was here, something Uncle Charlie was eager to work on. He repurposed an old boat for a bookshelf and strung up a net with clothespins, which pinched blue-tinged square photos between their wooden jaws. Thea browsed these, smiling at her father and how young she and her brothers looked. That evening, Thea settled onto the couch and began a movie with a hot bag of popcorn at her side. She had burned the first bag, and the scent still lingered in the air. But as the opening credits began, Thea heard the first distant rumble of thunder. She had seen the glower of a midsummer storm lurking in the mountains as she approached Valleygate, but it had finally arrived. It brought with it a branch-bending deluge, the kind of rain made up of thick, fat droplets that splat against the ground, darkening the pavement and slamming rooftops in percussive waves. Thea's grandfather used to say that a storm like this one came only once or twice a year, the storms that come fast and fierce and fill the gaps in the trees with an ominous haze. Following nothing but her own instinct, Thea moved to the back porch doors and slid them open, moving out into the oppressive showers. The clouds churned like a cauldron of bubbling liquid, popping and hissing as it swirled. She felt the raindrops break on her skin and clothes, the wind pull at her hair. Within seconds, she was soaked, but she let the storm surround her nonetheless. In her nose was the scent of dampening earth, and in her ears whistling gales and crashing thunder. In this moment she felt a freedom she had not felt in some time. She was completely untethered to anyone or anything. It was simply her own body, borne boldly to the thrashing nature before her. "Thea!" came a voice on the wind. "Theodora?" Thea tore her eyes from the sky and brought them down toward the stretch of grass in the yard beyond the porch. She jumped in surprise when she beheld a man standing some 10 or so feet in front of her at the bottom of the stairs to the porch. He held an umbrella and peered from beneath it with gray eyes that bore the same tumult of the tempest above them. "Alder?" Thea asked as the house brought to mind her memory. Long had the face of Alder Fellowfish lain dormant in the place she hid her treasured memories of Valleygate. But here it was, staring at her. Only the jaw was wider and more defined, and yet the boyish look he wore now was the same as it had always been. "What are you doing?" Thea suddenly came back to herself and finally felt the bitter bite of the pittering rain. Her skin was raised with goosebumps and her hair falling in clumped strands in front of her face. She realized just how ridiculous and pitiful she must look. She tried, but no good reason to relish the raging skies came to mind, and she couldn't quite bring herself to admit the feelings of freedom and self-discovery she had. Instead, she shrugged. "I don't know." An amused grin broke across Alder's face as he motioned to the storm around them. "Well, can I get you back inside?" Thea looked back toward the open porch door before focusing once more on Alder. Yeah, come on." She scurried back to the safety of the house and waited for Alder to enter before sliding the door shut. The wind fought against her for a moment, but when she was finally able to get it shut, the thrashing of the trees and rain was deafened, and just the muffled din of drops hitting the windows accompanied their silence. She was a good foot shorter than he, and they were stood face to face. or face to chest in Thea's case, both perched on the small welcome rub protecting the polished wood flooring, like an island floating on a caramel-colored sea. "Hi," Thea said. "Hi," Alder smiled back. "Wait a minute, what were you doing in the backyard?" Thea asked, placing her fingers on his chest and forcing him in an arm's length away from her. She left 5 small dots of moisture on his forest green shirt. His amused expression turned to realization, and perhaps embarrassment, that he was indeed found to be in her backyard, unannounced. "I promise I wasn't spying on you," he said quickly. "Charlie, your uncle, pays me to do some landscaping around here, and I left some tools out earlier this week that I've been meaning to pick up." He watched with relief as Thea's posture relaxed a bit, and he finished. "When the storm came, I rushed over here to grab them before they got too wet." Thea could now see that he was holding both the handle of an umbrella and a small trowel in his left hand. "See?" he said, taking the trowel in his other hand and holding it up to show her. Okay, Thea said. Her face flushed, but she hoped the clumps of hair in her face masked the color of embarrassment that now fluttered through her body. "Sorry." "No problem." He smiled in that same boyish way that tugged uncomfortably on the memories she had thought were long gone. They stood there for a moment, just sort of staring at one another in disbelief, before Thea remembered that she wore only an oversized shirt that was now clinging to her body in a way that left very little to Alder's imagination. "Oh my gosh," she said, turning away from him, heat rising to her cheeks. "Oh, geez, yeah, sorry, I wasn't looking at that, I promise. I'm gonna go change. Yeah, go get some dry clothes on." Thea rushed away, sure now that her body had turned a tomato red, but when she looked in the mirror, she saw only the cream-colored skin she was used to, if a bit paler from the cold. She changed quickly into other still comfortable clothing before returning downstairs. "All dry?" Alder asked, clearly averting his gaze in an abundance of caution. "Yeah," Thea laughed. "You can look now. I'm all good." "Good," Alder said. "Well, I should go." Alder began a stiff walk down the hallway to the front door. It was strange and unfamiliar the way her heart sank into her stomach, something that she never felt when Ethan would leave. "Oh, okay. But will I see you around?" Thea asked. Alder turned back toward her. Yeah, I'll be, wherever, I guess. And I'll be dancing in a thunderstorm if you need me. You'll have to teach me how to do that sometime." "Deal." Alder closed the front door and Thea sat herself back down on the couch. The storm raged on overhead, but the storm in her mind had begun to calm. She still wrestled with the decisions that lay before her, but in her heart a kind of peace had roosted, warming her thoughts toward brighter and happier things. The next morning, the sun illuminated specks of dust as they swirled in the window of Thea's nautical room. She did not remember falling asleep in her bed. She had drifted off on the couch. She was sure of it. But then she watched the windows close themselves against the cacophony of birdsong that had woken her. "Thank you," Thea whispered. And in response, the kindly old spirit that has dwelt within the house since its construction eked and irked, happy to give rest and respite to any who enter it, but especially a Bridgebrook. Thea spent that day unpacking both her bags and the memories she had hidden away of this strange and wonderful town. Many things came to mind, but among all of them, one stood out. It was the memory that nothing happens in Valleygate. This episode of Nothing Happens in Valleygate was written by me, Josiah, with assistance from Brianna Steiner. It was recorded, edited, and sound designed also by me, Josiah. Nothing Happens in Valleygate's theme is by Andy Ferris. Thank you for listening to episode 5 of season 3 of Nothing Happens in Valleygate, everybody. I am very happy to have you engage in a more narrative version of this podcast, and I hope that you enjoy it. I would love to hear your feedback on what you think of sort of a more narrative style. I've been interested in writing in that way a little bit more recently, so I hope that you enjoyed it. Hey, you can go ahead and join us on Instagram at Visit Valleygate. I've been posting little images, little illustrations that I've done to sort of signify each episode. They're low lift and easy for me to do, so that's what I've been posting there. You can also rate and review us on Apple Podcasts. That helps a ton. You don't understand how much that helps. So if you want to just tap 5 stars, that's fine. But if you want to leave a review, I'd love to hear from you and read that as well. And lastly, you can email me at visitvalley@gmail.com. You can send in, your feedback or pretty much anything if you want to just get a hold of me, and I'd love to chat with you there. So thank you so much for listening. I know this is a shorter outro, but I've been trying to cut down on the rambling. So I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. I hope you have a wonderful week, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.